ahead and call the meeting to order. I don't think there's any alternatives, right?
I don't think so.
So we'll move on for consideration of the approval meeting minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Okay, that's good. Next board meeting date will be May 29th, it looks like, in North Liberty. Any big conflicts with that?
That's
Mayor?
my anniversary. I
fine.
don't know. Does that count as conflict?
Okay.
Okay, now we've got time for public discussion of any items not on the agenda. Is there anybody here for anything to present to the board? Okay, I don't think so. 3A, we've got to consider action regarding participation in the federal aid swap whereby state funding could replace the federal funding for local road and bridge projects. We'll open it up for public now, or do you want Brad?
How about I go through it and then we can
Okay.
ask if there's anybody. Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yep, that'd be great. So Kent Ralston, thank you everyone for coming. Kent Ralston, Director of the MPO. As we discussed at your January meeting, last year House File 203 was signed into law permitting the Iowa Transportation Commission to allow what's commonly referred as the federal aid swap, which I think most of you are fairly familiar with at this point in time. The swap generally is a process whereby road and bridge funds that would have typically been funded through the MPO with federal funding would be swapped for state funding. The idea being streamlining projects and minimizing costs. At this time last year, the Transportation Technical Advisory Committee unanimously recommended participating in the swap. However, after a lengthy discussion, the board chose to opt out of the swap by a vote of 11 affirmative and 4 against opting in. Of the board's many concerns, Davis-Bacon wages, worker safety, and lack of data supporting the benefits of the swap, I think, were central to the conversation. And as you all know, I think our MPO is the only MPO in the state that's opting out of the swap at this point in time. Similar to last year, unless our MPO chooses to opt out of the swap, the DOT will assume we're opting in or choosing to participate. Unfortunately, since the swap didn't take effect until October of 2018, we don't have a lot of data to provide to you, as we mentioned at your January board meeting. And at that time, we had a discussion about, speaking with your engineering staff about what their how they favor the swap and what their concerns would be opting in or opting out. The Iowa DOT did, however, indicate that the project development timeline for projects has been minimized by about 6 months for most projects thus far, and certainly there's a cost savings to that. I have attached the meeting minutes from your March 2018 meeting as well as the DOT's final swap policy language for your reference. Keep in mind that this is we're only swapping surface transportation block grant funds at this point in time and cannot swap our transportation alternative program funds. So it's the larger pool of funding that in a separate agenda item tonight you'll address, not the smaller funding that we typically use for trails. At their March 26th meeting last week, the Transportation Technical Advisory Committee also had a discussion concerning the swap and voted unanimously to participate in the swap. And what we'd like from the board today is that you discuss this item and provide staff with a vote whether to not participate in the swap. And I'm happy to answer any questions as best I can.
Kent, when we met in January and didn't take a stand then, the idea was because it didn't start until October, there wasn't enough data, and that the idea being that at this meeting we would have more data. Which apparently we don't.
Correct.
And I get that, it was a really bad winter and I'm sure there weren't a lot of projects happening. However, until which time we receive compelling data, making it, this is absolutely, I appreciate that, okay, this is reduced by 6 months' time. That's money saved. I get that. But I'm still very concerned about the Davis-Bacon and that could be bypassed. And in fact, when you say that, it just sounds like the wage thing, but there are so many implications that fall under Davis-Bacon in terms of projects getting done on time, people being working in situations that are safe, and all of the implications that go with a very trained labor force, and also using local labor. So I personally, my stance is to still go for the opt-out. We're entering into a construction season, and at that point, then I think that we're going to be getting a lot of data that we could use. But again, it would have to be rather compelling for me to go the other way.
Sure.
So I just thought I'd put that out there as to open up the discussion.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And something I failed to mention as well is that unless something changes with the way the DOT is handling this, we will discuss this every year at about this time. And the rationale for doing this now is because, as I already mentioned, we'll have an agenda item later tonight where we discuss allocating the MPO funds available to us. And then we start our Transportation Improvement Program timeline, which is actually programming the funds that you will all allocate to projects. So this kind of leads right into the Transportation Improvement Program timeline. And that would change slightly if we were to participate in the swap.
What do you mean by slightly?
We would have to, there would be some different things we would put in the TIP. So it's not something you all would see, but with the actual programming, there's some different rules that the DOT would have us follow. Basically just the way by which we actually enter the projects into the system that we enter and so on. So it just changes things for staff a little bit.
Kent, before we go too much more discussion on the board, should we open up for any public or anybody that came to speak on the item before the board discusses? That way we have all the information.
Sounds great.
So is there anybody to speak on this item that came tonight? Okay. Yeah, if you could come up to the pedestal and speak into the mic, please.
Hello. Was this on? Oh, over here. Speak into the light, right? Okay. Hello, I'm Bill Gerhardt. I'm the president of Iowa State Building Trades. I've lived in Iowa City since 1969. I've worked construction, both building and heavy and highway work. And I want to thank you guys for opting out last year from the road swap scheme, let's call it. And you're right, we're the only one in the state that has done that. I think mostly because there's so much confusion about whether we could actually do it. But I think you guys, by opting out, has given, I think, confidence to other areas of the state to be able to do the same. I think everyone got sent the article about the bi-state MPO over in the Quad Cities. They're probably going to opt out. I know the people in Des Moines are thinking about it, and probably Cedar Rapids and Dubuque, so thank you for doing that. I think it's a sad state of affairs when we try to look for ways to get out of wage protection for workers. And not only wage protection for your workers, but the Buy American Act. We've got two foundries in our area that make the same steel that we'd be buying from China. Now, why we wouldn't want to encourage people to use our steel versus a Chinese steel, I don't know. And I've got some serious doubts. I've heard this twice about the data shows that this minimizes the amount of time on jobs. I think every HR study that shows that the more you pay a person, the more productive they are. And this sort of flies in the face for that. You're saying that the less you pay someone, the more productive they are, and they get the job done faster. So I've got a qualm with that. But I had something happen last summer that really brought this home to me, what we're talking about. A colleague and I, matter of fact, he's here, Danny and I were coming back from Strawberry Point to Iowa City, and we were at a road construction where you have to wait for the pilot car to come. We were the first car on the line there, and there was a guy there holding a flag. Danny was driving, I had the passenger window. I rolled her down, I'm talking to the guy. And I said, who do you work for? And he told me he worked for. I go, what do you get paid? And he says, well, I get $10 an hour, unless I'm on a federal job, and I get $26 an hour. So that's the difference for people out working, is $26 an hour versus $10 an hour, because without Davis-Bacon protection, the only protection you got is minimum wage. And out of that $10 an hour and out of the $26 an hour, he has to live out of town. The per diem's really unheard of in heavy highway construction. So that was a stark contrast to me as what we're doing is the right thing. We need to keep those federal wage protections when we can and hope that the federal government doesn't ever do away with them. So anyway, thank you for last year for opting out, and I hope you do the same this year.
Thank you. And is there anybody else that would like to speak? Came tonight. Okay, I don't think so. Okay, we'll open up discussion with the board if there is any, or entertain a motion, whatever you guys want to act on.
As we both we've talked to our city engineers about things, and give you the information that we received, or at least I received from Mars. Federal aid funding increases engineering costs for both the design phase and construction phase of a roadway project. Design, build, construction phase, professional services for locally funded roadway projects is typically around 12 to 13% of construction cost. Federal aid roadway projects are generally around 20. So these percentages vary from project to project depending on the scope of services, size, complexity, contractor performance, etc. But 7% to 8% more for federal aid functioning is about right. So I wanted to pass that information on to the group from our engineer as well.
And our engineer, they both work at Shive Hattery, yours and mine, and he explains a little bit more about where specifically there are increases in the project. There's a substantial amount of work involved in the weekly reviews of payroll reports, and each contractor must submit a weekly wage report for every employee that worked on the project. And this is for the duration of the project. Another area is the DOT post-project audit process is very thorough and require a substantial amount of time and effort to prepare for and complete. And then he also adds, it does seem the federal aid projects take longer to close out once construction is completed. Most of this is related to the audit process. He says it's fair to say that the longer the project takes, that there are more costs are involved. Somewhere in the range of 3 to 6 months seems to be fair. And the longer the project takes, the more expensive it is. And that could mean that our small city couldn't do a project if it, depending on that increase, because of this increase. And he says here, the DOT process for the construction phase of federal aid projects has more paperwork and documentation requirements than non-Fed aid projects. This is not to say that the non-federal aid projects mean that documentation is overlooked or ignored. The forms, reviews, and level of documentation required for the audit process just take a little more time every day, which adds up over the course of a project. So I'm going to vote to opt in.
I guess my position is I'm continuing to support opt-out. I think, first of all, let's look at the role of what the paperwork process is. That's to ensure that there's not misclassification and to ensure that the wages that the contractors are promising are actually paid. I think we want to have those eyes and ears on the ground to be able to assure that they are being treated fairly, that they're being paid a living wage. And I don't think there's anyone at this table that would want to get a cheaper cost for the community that comes directly out of the pocket of the worker, and that's where a lot of the efficiency comes. This also does not come in a vacuum. I do think this is part of an ongoing effort for union busting, and I don't think we should be a part of it. And I think that the other districts are going to do what the other districts are going to do, but at least in terms of where I'm coming from, we need to provide the leadership to say that we are not going to save a buck at the expense of the worker. So I'm going to be adamantly opposed to any change in the status quo. I don't, Lisa's point, I do not think we have enough data to justify these efficiency considerations that are proffered. I also have not heard any data relating to the safety differences. The safety impact. Kent, I don't know if you have that. Do you have that data? Well, I think that's data that we should have as part of our decision making. So until we get compelling evidence to the contrary to justify selling the workers short, I will not support any change in what we have done so far.
Last year, I voted to opt in. Over the year, it really hasn't affected us that much, and I agree that I think that another year would be fine, and I'm going to vote opt out this time.
I also will be voting to opt out. Lisa made a good point, and Rockne reiterated that we still don't have enough data, I don't think, to prove the effectiveness of it, and all we're hearing is some potential ill effects of it, and particularly, and Rockne mentioned saving a buck at the expense of the worker. I think saving a buck at the expense of the safety of the project. Cheap is what I've always heard, and if we're going with the cheap steel made outside of this country, that's not good. I mean, we're talking about the infrastructure of our area that needs to be safe. People are going to be traveling on it. We want it to be safe. We want it to be built right. Working faster isn't always better. Working faster can lead to problems, the safety of the workers, and haste makes waste is also my belief, and I just don't think saving the 6 months' time in the long run it benefits this.
I think the same thing. I just agree with everyone here who suggests to opt out because I think we have the same concern from last year. Nothing has been changed from the concern that we raised last year. Then I also opting out.
I agree with everything that has been said, with the points that Lisa, Rockne both made. You know, for me, I do get really concerned anytime we look at ways to reduce any type of oversight. I feel like that just opens up the door for paying these folks a lower wage. I feel like it opens up the door for, you know, more dangerous working conditions, and I think, you know, this is dangerous, difficult work. We want to make sure that the people that are doing these jobs, that they are being paid well and that they're safe. I think that, you know, we look at, we've just come through a really extreme winter where, you know, there were folks out in terribly cold conditions. You know, I think we just have to be really, really careful about protecting workers and paying them well. So I too will be voting to opt out.
One of the questions I have is, how can we talk about safety when they're still ruled by the same OSHA rules as anybody else?
When I think about that, and I think that's a really valid question, when somebody mentioned union busting. Union projects have a history of having safer standards, fewer accidents, getting the job, fewer change orders even, getting the job done within the timeline that was initially suggested, and the safety standard is much higher. It just is. And I can give, you know, anecdotal things, and I'll just say, there are multiple cases right here locally of misclassification. And part of that is, you know, you're hired on, and then later on when you notice that, oh, I'm not getting, you know, no workers' comp taken out, what's going on? Oh, you're a contracted worker, you don't get it. Oh, and those fingers that you just cut down to the tendons, sorry, you just can't work now. And that's an actual case. So I think that those safety things have to be, the oversight has to be there, and that happens when you have that ability to use union work, and I'm not interested in doing anything that would undermine that.
What I'm having a hard time with is that we have opinion. I haven't seen any good documentable evidence from any side. And that I'm disappointed in.
But isn't that part of the issue, is that we don't have compelling evidence to depart from what we did last year? So
Or
in
from
the
the
absence of
contractors,
that.
our labor union, to document. See, here we have our reports and what we can present you.
Yep, yep. But one thing I do recall from our discussion last year is I believe maybe Bill had provided there's some good peer-reviewed journal articles on the question of the safety differences based upon a union project and not, and this is not explicitly union, right? Davis-Bacon does not require, but I think it is more likely to meet those standards. You'd have a higher likelihood that there would be union that would be used. So I think we could probably do a follow-up in terms of getting the data on that. But I think in terms of, unless there's substantial empirical evidence to change what we're doing, given what we know in terms of the wage impact, I'm not I don't want to change it.
Yeah, my particular thing is, it seems like most of the problem's on the front end. This is the regulations and things like that. That's where we as a group should really be attacking this whole thing to begin with. You know, livable wages, I don't have a problem. Union wages, I don't have a problem. But Macon Davis rules, have no problem. I'd be still open to implement some of those, even on a local basis. You bid a public contract, let's see your wage scales, presentation for a project, and we'll decide from there.
You make good points. It's still, my feeling is, you know, Bill and these people are on the front of the line, and they know this stuff. And I'm just kind of at that point where I'd like to give it just another year. And we could, it's not going to harm us for another year. And we didn't harm us up till October, did it? So it's not going to make a big amount of difference.
Do we have a plan for collecting this data? Like, you know, just again, so we do have something to base it off of, you know, so that we can see, you know, that in the next year, you know, that, you know, yes, that it did not have an impact on wages, it did not have an impact on safety and things like that, or if it did.
Yeah, I mean, I have a loose plan, which is to ask the DOT to actually provide the information, which they've told me they will. And I only say I rely on the DOT because as an MPO, we don't actually contract for the work, so I don't really have any ability to actually track anything. So aside from asking the DOT, I'd also like to work with individual engineers from your respective communities, ask them the same question. You know, the Technical Advisory Committee has voted 2 times now unanimously to participate in the swap. And it sounds like the board is, for the second time now, leaning towards not participating, and that's fine. But I would like to ask the engineers, okay, you know, if you have an interest in this, it behooves you to actually provide some data and you know, try and convince this board otherwise.
Do we know anything about the local hiring aspects of our contract?
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, and in some informal conversations with engineers, it seems that they don't have a really good mechanism to provide that either right now, without, you know, putting a lot of effort into it, which they obviously don't have time to do right now. So,
And I think Terry brings up a good point, but I think in terms of, as I understand it, there's a lot of home rule limitations in terms of us being able to put standards, labor standards, above and beyond, you know, what state law requires. So at least at this point, I don't think that we can do that. I know that we can't do the project labor agreements, those sorts of things. So unfortunately, we don't have that mechanism to sort of reach the same. And if we could do that, if we could have a project labor agreement where we could be assured that we would get those higher standards, maybe we could consider that and get some of those efficiency gains. But this is, unfortunately, it seems like the only tool we have at this point, at least as I can see it.
yeah, I didn't re-ask the question this year, but last year, Eleanor Dilks, the Iowa City attorney, is also the MPO's attorney. And through a discussion with her, her understanding is we cannot set a prevailing wage on our own projects, was her understanding. I don't pretend to understand all the ins and outs of that, but that was my understanding, is we cannot have that labor agreement separate from this. And for all the, I can't exactly explain all the reasons why not, but that was she made that pretty clear.
Because basically, we've had all local control on anything on wage taken away.
Right.
As far as Tiffin goes, our engineer has basically said what Shive Hattery has told North Liberty, that they assure us that it will save significant time, and the engineering fee would definitely be cut 7 to 10%. That's a pretty significant amount on some projects. And then, like I've said before, Tiffin rarely gets federal money. Most all of our projects don't include federal money, so we're using contractors local all the time anyway. So we get good products the way we are now without the federal rules. So I'm going to vote the same way I did last year as an opt-in, because it seems to be the best for Tiffin. So, but I respect everybody else's opinions. Any other comments?
So I think we had a motion to opt in, right? Didn't we?
We don't have a motion at all that I heard.
No,
But
I
we
don't
can-
believe so.
I'll entertain a motion either way, because you want to vote either way, right? So whichever way somebody wants to make a motion.
I move that we opt out.
Second.
Okay, so we got the motion and second. Any other discussion? Everybody get their piece said?
Just one, Kent, from the university perspective, we're not going to be in this. I'm going to abstain. Normally, that would not be my role. But
Yeah.
in this particular matter, since we don't receive funding and we do it on our own, I'm not going to muddy the waters. So
Yeah.
we can
Yeah.
record that accordingly, please.
Yeah, I appreciate that. We actually, Aaron attended an orientation that we had
Nope, not
a
there.
while back, and we discussed it. The university, to my knowledge, has never received federal funds from our organization, and it's a little murky as to whether they even can, so
Correct.
I respect that.
I'm an operator of a very large department, and we do have a 17 or 18 miles of institutional road, so I can tell you what cost savings and time savings does, because the winter that we did just have also handed us a lot of failing roads. So, my operator side does come out pretty strongly on this, but nonetheless, I need to represent the university in a neutral manner on this.
Very interesting.
You want to do a roll call? Kent? It sounds like discussion's done, or
Yeah,
or
we
just
certainly
call for a
can.
vote, or-
Yeah, I would just call for a vote. I think we can.
Roll
That's
call.
Oh, okay.
Hayden?
Aye.
Okay, and just so everybody's abundantly clear.
I was just
This
gonna
will be
state that.
so, the motion is so to not participate in the swap or opt out, however you want to
So an
to
aye
look
vote
at
would
that. So
support
Hayden?
Aye. Aye.
No.
Do
That got
my
really
do
loud.
my arguments present. Present.
Well, is that an aye or an A? We're all present.
That's right.
Are you voting?
Present.
Present, that's it.
That's not a vote.
Aye.
Yes, it is.
Yeah,
Yeah, I know.
Shane abstains. Mims?
Aye.
I'm a non-voter.
yeah.
Correct.
I'll say no.
Yes.
Aye.
I'm going to be very clear. I'm opting out.
Thank you.
Aye.
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 Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Just point of order. I don't see how present is a vote, aye or nay. I mean, that's
It's an
just
acceptable
stating
vote.
that you're here.
We have no other governing rules. It's acceptable vote. It's done in the state, done in the federal.
does it mean?
Be done on the thing.
I mean, besides the fact that you're here, as we all are, what does that mean?
It means that without the information that I don't have, I can't make a vote either way.
Oh,
Like some.
okay.
You're welcome.
Oh, I gotta abstain.
That means he's not.
Okay. We good to move on, Ken?
We are. Thank you very much.
Okay, we're on to 4A. This is to consider approval of a locally determined projects list for the MPO fiscal 2020 Transportation Planning Work Program.
Thank you. This one should prove to be easier than the last. As you will remember, each spring we compile a list of transportation planning work program projects for the upcoming fiscal year, and this year's no different. While this exercise is required by both the Federal Highway Administration and the Department of Transportation, we also use it internally to, of course, schedule our work and our data collection needs for the work we are asked to do. In your packet, I attached the list of work program projects that we've received to date from your respective staff, and I believe it's 36, in the order of 36 or so projects. We're aware that other projects come up throughout the year. We're typically able to handle those, although if there's any large projects that we're asked to do that would disrupt what you will approve at your next meeting, we'll bring those back to the board for discussion. I will say that the list of projects that are in the packet represent probably a quarter to a third of the work we'll actually do. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. It's just difficult for your engineers to let us know what they want us to do for the entire fiscal year of 2020. So that's to be expected. What we'd like from you all today is that you please review the list of attached projects and let us know of any clarifications you might have or any questions. Otherwise, we will add all the federally mandated work that we have to do and bring the full work program back to you at your next meeting for final approval. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. Looks to be another good year.
Can you provide a little more background on Iowa City's master plan achieving the gold standard?
That's number 4?
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is something that was in our work program last year as well and was asked again. Basically, the city of Iowa City, as you know, adopted a bike master plan in 2017, And this is to help with anything we can to try and get that to where it needs to be and to reach the goals that are in the plan.
So when is that submitted? You'll be submitting something to?
You've got to re-up the bike-friendly communities designation. I believe it is every 4 years now. I think it was every 3, and I think they changed it to every 4. I believe we've got 2 more years. Don't quote me on that, but I believe we've got a few more years before we have to re-up for Iowa City.
So you don't need any action on this then tonight?
Just a simple vote, whether you're okay with the projects, yeah.
Oh, so you're
Yeah, that
still
would be
looking for a motion? Okay.
Please.
Move to approve the project list.
Second.
Okay. We got a motion and a second. Any other discussion?
One more, Kent, on number 14, Darian's thing to assist with implementation of bike share program.
Yeah.
If we could just have the, the cross coordination with the campus, because we have the
Definitely.
same, interests. So.
Yep, certainly. And the request store isn't as important as just that it's in the work program, so we don't forget. Yeah, thank you for pointing that out.
Anything else? Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no? Okay. That's
Thank you.
approved. Okay, we're on to 4B, consider approval of the MPO fiscal 20 transit program of projects. Brad, you're up.
Yep, Brad Newman, Assistant Transportation Planner. The first item here I have is the annual program of projects for the 3 transit agencies in the area. That's Iowa City, Coralville, and CAMBUS. Each year they produce a program of projects. It's a federal requirement, and it identifies all the federally funded equipment or operating amounts that they could receive or do receive during the year. You'll see there's attachments for each, one for each agency. Identifies a lot of buses and equipment. The operating amount is in there. This information will go to, well, it'll actually be part of the consolidated funding application process, which is something each agency does through the DOT. And it's for federal, state funding and all the other requirements that the state has. And it will be in there and does require a public hearing at the council level. So this will be part of that. It will also be part of the FY20 to 23 Transportation Improvement Program, which you'll be approving in July. The Technical Advisory Committee unanimously recommended approval of the program of projects at their March 26th meeting. And staff is requesting approval as well. And I'm happy to answer any questions. I think some of the interesting things in there is the cost of a bus is almost $500,000. So, and of course, those are, it's a whole nother topic, but those go on a list at the state level, and then we wait until, see how much money we get federally, and we go down the list based on the age of the bus and the miles, and then that's when it gets funded. So, but we have to have them in our program of projects and the TIP in order to get the funding, so.
Move approval.
Thank you.
Second.
All right. Any other discussion? Hearing nothing. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carried. Okay, moving on. 4C, consider approval of the MPO Surface Transportation Block Grant and Transportation Alternative Program funding allocations.
Yes, this is, the Iowa DOT has provided the MPO with funding targets of about $6.6 million to be programmed in FY23 and 24, at least for the Surface Transportation Block Grant. They've also provided $1.45 million in Transportation Alternative Program funding, and that will be for FY21 through 24. So there's a 4-year window for the TAP. And if you remember, we do this process every 2 years. We gather up 2 funding targets before we apportion any money out. 2 years ago, we did not do the TAP because the state wouldn't allow us to do it at the time because they were changing the program. The program has since been changed back, pretty much. So now we're back on track, but we have 4 years worth of funding, and that's why we have the $1.45 million. We had 4 entities submit a total of 3 applications for SDBG funding, totaling over $18 million, and 3 entities submitting 4 applications for TAP funding, totaling just over $1.5 million. Two of the TAP projects are not currently in the MPO's long-range transportation plan. The way we've done this in the past is all these projects to even be considered had to be included in the long-range transportation plan. So it went through all the public participation process to get on the list. Like I said, two of the TAP projects are not, and we did hear from the Iowa Department of Transportation, and they indicated that they had a new interpretation of some of their rules, and that the TAP projects no longer need to be in the long-range transportation plan. This is something we'll probably have to deal with. We didn't have time to deal with it at this point. We just didn't have time between the application process and when we heard from the DOT. But the MPO, we do have concerns over this. One I mentioned is the public participation process. These projects have not been through that project. The only time they would be is in the TIP after you approve it to be in the TIP. And the other concern we have is basically we've been operating for a certain amount of time under a certain interpretation for years with the DOT. And our concern is that can always flip back over the other way again. And then they're going to require it later on. You got to remember these projects are years 23 and 24, so they're a good ways out, and a lot can change by that time. So that's our concern over that issue. Attached in your packet, you'll find a summary of the projects, including project description, our staff scores, the project totals, the funding request, the local match, and the recommended funding levels. The scoring criteria is also attached, as is a copy of each application. I think we did those electronically. It gets pretty thick to send out to anyone. So let's see. I want to go through all the projects. We have those 9 projects, and we'll start with the STBG projects.
Yeah,
Got a little, oh, go ahead.
So I was going to just say, unfortunately, the screen's here behind us, so if you're on this side, we may have to move. Be careful of cords if you're walking around.
And this is just it's called a flyover, and it's so you can see where all the projects, the proposed projects are at. All right, so we'll start with the STBG projects. We had Iowa City, North Liberty, and Tiffin each submitted 1 application, and Coralville had submitted 2 applications for STBG funding. And we'll start with Iowa City's Dodge Street Improvement Project, and we'll go by how staff scored. That'll be the how we present these to you. So the Iowa City's project is the Dodge Street Improvement Project, and that is between Burlington Street and Governor Street. It did receive 48 points from the staff in the scoring. This project is a complete reconstruction of Dodge Street and includes new pavement, water main, sanitary sewer, stormwater, traffic signals, on-street buffered bike lanes, sidewalks on both sides. The total cost of the project is $13,250,000. Iowa City is requesting $4,867,000 in STBG funding. I'd like to give each community an opportunity to elaborate on the project if you'd like to, or any comments or questions. Okay, we'll move on.
Actually, I have one. What is a buffered bike lane? Is that actually curved with a dedicated lane, or what does that mean?
Just striped.
The 30-inch lines.
Sorry, so the buffered bike lane would actually just be a painted, striped, basically,
Like the
it's like,
green?
yeah, in this case, it may not be green, but it'll be 2 stripes, essentially connect with hash marks. So you've got maybe a couple feet of buffer rather than just a 4-inch
Got it.
solid white line.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to Coralville's 5th Street Reconstruction Project. This is just west of 12th Avenue to 20th Street. It received 40 points in our scoring. The project includes a 29-foot wide street, 8-foot wide sidewalk along the north side, and a 6-foot wide sidewalk along the south side, and streetscaping. The total project cost is $2,856,600. Coralville is requesting $2,285,280 in STBG funding. Anything else from Coralville or about that project? Any questions? Okay. Move on to the third project. It's North Liberty's Highway 965 reconstruction project. This is Ranshaw Way to Forever Green Road, and it received 34 points in the scoring. This project is the final phase for the Highway 965 reconstruction through North Liberty and will include trails, curbs, and stormwater management. The total project cost is $9,595,000, and North Liberty is requesting $7,196,250 in STBG funding. Any other comments on the North Liberty project?
The only thing is that in order to prevent a war on funding, we can accept the decision to go ahead and defer to Tiffin's needs, and that will apply later on.
That's nice of you. Yeah, that's what they say.
So we'll move on to Tiffin's North Park Road Improvement Project. It received 32 points in our scoring. This project will reconstruct the existing 2-lane road to a 4-lane urban cross-section and includes installation of storm sewers, 10-foot wide sidewalks, at-grade and grade-separated pedestrian crossings at the new Clear Creek Amana Elementary Schools. The total project cost is $5,279,472, and Tiffin is requesting $2.5 million in STBG funding.
I can explain just a little bit more, because most of you probably don't get out to Tiffin and see this as much as the other projects there. At Highway 6 at the south end, a roundabout is going in there, and that construction starts here in about a month. This will fill in from there to the north part where the developer has built a 4-lane boulevard from there north to Forever Green and then over to the interstate. So this will fill in that section, which is actually currently part gravel and part pavement. So that's what this will do, is make this 4-lane to match what is north of it with full urbanization, gutters, storm sewer, and the big 10-foot trail. So that's what that does. So.
What is your grade separated crossing? Are you going over? Do you have the real estate to go over? Or?
There's one tunnel.
Oh, you're going under?
Yeah, there's one spot where it'll go under. The developer is going under up north.
Wow.
And we have one where we'll go under during this section, in this section as well.
Cool.
Okay. We'll move on to the last STBG project, and that's Coralville's First Avenue and Oakdale Boulevard roundabout. Received 26 points. This project will convert the existing 4-leg intersection operating with temporary signals to a 4-leg roundabout and includes an 8-foot wide shared use path on the west and north legs of the roundabout. The total project cost is $1,847,475, and Coralville is requesting $1,275,275 in STBG funding. Any comments on that project? Okay. We'll move on to our Transportation Alternative Program funding. Iowa City and North Liberty each submitted one application, and Coralville submitted 2 applications for the TAP funding. The first one is Coralville's Iowa River Trail Replacement Project, and this is between Rocky Shore Drive and Clear Creek, and it received 54 points. This project will replace approximately a half-mile of trail that was destroyed by flooding, and includes a 10-foot wide concrete trail and a pre-engineered bridge spanning Clear Creek. The project received $462,717 in TAP funding in 2015 and is currently programmed in the TIP for FY20. The total project cost is $889,970, and Coralville is requesting an additional $151,363 in TAP funding. Any other comments on that?
That's the original that's the original connector between Iowa City and Coralville for bicycles. and the abutments are already in for, in Clear Creek. So the bridge is going to go across. So it's just another connector, but it used to be the only connector.
Yeah. Okay, move on to Iowa City's Highway 6 Trail project. This is between Fair Meadows Boulevard and Hines Road and received 43 points. This project is part of the Highway 6 Trail project and includes a 10-foot wide trail along the south side of Highway 6. The total project cost is $548,000, and Iowa City is requesting $438,000 in TAP funding. Any comments on Iowa City's project? Okay, move on to North Liberty's project. And that's the North Liberty Road Trail project, and it received 29 points. This project will install an 8-foot wide multi-use trail on the south and west side of Penn Street and North Liberty Road. The total project cost is $1,107,000, and North Liberty is requesting $664,200 in TAP funding. This project is one of those that is not currently in the MPO's long-range transportation plan. Anything else on that project?
No.
Okay.
It's also going to help the dog park there that's going to be right around that hook curve up there and help the accessibility for that we're putting in.
Okay.
The other thing about that is that the school district has purchased land right in there for future buildings. So some of that open space there has been purchased by the school district, just FYI.
To the south of the curve there, or?
South of the curve, yeah, kind of in the middle. I don't know exactly which parcel it is, but it's somewhere in that section there.
Okay. Move on to the last TAP project, and that's the Clear Creek Trail connection in Coralville. And that's between Highway 6 and the Tom Harkin Trailhead. That project received 27 points. This project would construct a 10-foot wide concrete trail along the east side of Camp Cardinal Road. It's approximately 0.35 miles. The total project cost is $482,195, and Coralville is requesting $332,715 in TAP funding. This is the second project that is not included in the current long-range transportation plan. Any other comments on that?
That was the original industrial area. We didn't have sidewalks in there. And since then, the post offices that they swore they would never use it as a post office, they put it in there. And so it's an access point. We basically, it's well used. It's just a trail now. It's a dirt path, and it's a safety factor. We have to get that in there.
And that also has implications as well for the school district, as there's now in the new boundaries that will take effect in the fall, there's kids that are going from the north side of the strip there to Borlaug, which is on the south side, and there's no way to walk through there safely.
We've heard a lot of community feedback about this particular stretch for that reason. And as Tom said, people are walking there anyway. It is a bit of a safety hazard. The ground is actually worn down, like you can see where people are walking. So I think this is a really important project for a lot of reasons.
I'm curious with the actual bike trail, a little bit off topic, but when is it actually going to be connected all the way to Tiffin? Do we know with that, the bike trail along there? I mean, you said the Tom Harkin Trailhead. Does anyone know that?
I think the last piece is being done, but with the 380 interchange, it's going to be closed.
Yeah. Yeah, it will be open and shut and open and shut, but mostly shut, I think, for a while.
I love that trail. It's a beautiful trail.
Just in time.
It'll be great for Tiffin.
Yeah, exactly.
It'll be great done
Yeah.
for Tiffin, too.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Any other questions or comments on any of the proposed projects? Okay. In your packet, there is a summary table that includes the Technical Advisory Committee's funding recommendation for both STBG and TAP. And you'll also notice with the TAP applications that our Regional Trails and Bicycling Committee had reviewed those applications as well. and that the TTAC agreed with the RTBC recommendation. The recommendation on, we'll start with TAP, is to fully fund Coralville's Iowa River Trail proposal, Iowa City's Highway 6 Trail, and North Liberty's North Liberty Road Trail, and then the remainder of the funding would go towards Coralville's Clear Creek Trail connection. The STBG funding recommendation from the TAC would give Iowa City, their Dodge Street project, $3,750,000. Coralville would, for their Fifth Street improvements, would receive $1,650,000. And Tiffin would receive $1.2 million for the North Park Road improvements. The other two, the North Liberty project and Coralville's First Avenue and Oakdale Boulevard, would receive no funding this round. That is the recommendation from those groups. And of course, staff is requesting approval of the funding.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Motion and a second. Any discussion?
I'd mention just before we finish up our discussion that they're all very good projects. We work pretty closely with everybody's engineers, and we appreciate their help. The Regional Trails and Bicycling Committee takes a hard look at least the TAP projects before those go to the Technical Advisory Committee. So it's a really nice process we go through. The last thing I would mention is that currently you're allocating the funds internally as far as our MPO is concerned. After this, Brad will take these and actually put them into our Transportation Improvement Program, which, as I mentioned earlier tonight, is our it's the hard programming document that we have to put together for the DOT. And you'll have that will go through a 30-day public comment period, and then that's brought back to you for approval as well. So tonight we're allocating the funds sort of internally as a group, but then you'll get a chance to actually program those funds for the DOT at a later meeting. A series of steps.
I want to get it in minutes to thank North Liberty for bowing out because they scored just a little better than Tiffin, and we had discussions with them and want to thank them for that. So,
yes.
Anything else? I'm not hearing anything. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're on to 4D, which is an update on the Crandick Passenger Rails to Trail studies.
Yeah, as we reported at the last couple meetings, I believe, the Phase 3 passenger rail study is still on hold. HDR Consulting, the Crandick Railroad, and the Iowa DOT are still trying to resolve some of the ridership model and methodology issues with the Federal Transit Administration in Kansas City. It's been that way for a little while, and I think it's the methodology will determine how much more work we have to do to get the ridership numbers that we requested, and also what FTA would require in the future for any grant application. So we're kind of stuck there until they can get this issue resolved. We meant to have that project and the Rails to Trails study done at the same time, so you could look at those together. Unfortunately, the passenger rail study is unknown at this point when that's going to be done. Now, the Rails to Trails study, which is a shorter part of the Crandick corridor, it's about a 6.1 mile trail between Iowa City, downtown Iowa City, and the Oakdale campus. Iowa City, Coralville, Johnson County, and the University of Iowa participated in this study, and each has received a copy of the study for their review. The study focused on the railroad abandonment process, characteristics of a Rails to Trails project, connectivity to existing trails, potential liability issues, and the cost estimates for rail removal and trail development. And really, the bottom line was it was a range of about $3.5 to $5.5 million, and that depended on the trail surface itself, whether it be rock, asphalt, or concrete. So that was the range, and it's roughly $574,000 to $900,000 a mile. So the information's there. It did not include any purchase of property for park and rides or trailheads or anything like that. So it's just kind of a bare estimate as to what it would take to remove the train tracks and put in a trail on that portion. So that's all I had there. We hope to give you something on the Phase 3 soon. I know FTA is talking with DOT and HDR consultants, so, and
Yeah, this is one of those projects that unfortunately got caught up. FTA is claiming in the government shutdown, so they're still, what they tell us is digging out of their hole, so to speak. This is, yeah, it is unfortunate these two didn't come out, but they're essentially separate projects, you know, should the area choose to move forward with either passenger rail or the trail. So I think it's sort of neither here nor there, but it's available, and we will be posting it on our website. It's rather long, but we'll be posting it on the MPO website, and you can all review it if you so choose.
Kent, there are some dollar figures available. If we were able to do the rail service, we do have numbers in terms of how much that would cost, don't we? It struck me as not an astronomical number.
No, it's not. I think it was in the magnitude of $30 million, sort of on the cheap end. I think
30 to 40.
Yeah, 30 to 40 on the cheaper end. But that was
to
full.
Upgrade the rail, or what would that include?
That would upgrade the rail, buy the necessary train sets and equipment, and some operating. It's really the ridership number that we were hoping to get let me back up. A big part of the Phase 3 study that we're waiting on is to get a better ridership number, because that ridership number, of course, gives us revenue that might be generated. So the 30 to 40 million is sort of dependent on what the third study comes up with.
And presumably that would be necessary for any federal grants that we would apply. And if we didn't have federal grant money, there would not be as much of an, I mean, it strikes me that this is also a political football, right? I mean, there are some people like rail, some don't.
Sure. Yep.
And it seems a little bit, I'm not saying you did this, but in terms of the interagency discussion, that it may be a little bit way of bureaucratically, making this go off way into the future with no movement on this.
Yeah.
Do you know anything about the nature of the conflict in terms of how the conflict is?
Yeah, so I think, I understand what you're saying, it is political, but in this case, really, it's the methodology by which they're going to use our MPO model, so our travel demand model that we use, that the DOT approves.
Yeah.
It's really the methodology by which HDR Consulting wanted to use our model to produce basically a new model to use, and that's what the funding was meant to do. What they did not do, unbeknownst to us, is ask the FTA in advance if that methodology would be acceptable for a future grant application. The FTA so far is saying basically they don't think it would be. They've asked some questions, but they basically said unless you can answer these questions in a satisfactory way, that would not be good enough. So the whole idea of the third study was to have it be the last study, and it was very clear that this group did not want to keep spending money on studies, which is understandable. So the whole idea that now we might not be able to use that ridership figure that we would get for a future grant application to the FTA, which the application's free, it does not sit well with us. So at this point, hopefully we'll be able to reconcile our differences between the FTA. If we can't, HDR essentially said it would double the contract cost, which I don't think is acceptable, and then we're going to have to get into backing out of the contract. That's the way I feel about it. But also keep in mind that the DOT and Krandic have also helped fund that study. We're in for a third, local governments, and it's a fairly small amount of money, $30,000, give or take, so for our urban area. So it's really a fairly small study. However, if they can't fulfill the study, then we've got an issue. Yeah.
How are the ridership numbers being determined?
So that's the difference we're having with the FTA, but they actually build, using our information in our travel demand model, they actually build a new model. It's called the STOPS model, and it's a model not dissimilar from our travel demand model, but for actual passenger rail ridership, believe it or not. So it's a model that's used in other places, but the data from our model that would be used, they're not so wild about. That's where we're hung up.
Kind of like extrapolated type from what currently
it's
comes
based
through.
on socioeconomic data.
No, there's no piece of it then that incorporates actual feedback from potential people living along that.
This contract did not have a ridership survey in it, I don't believe, no. It's more or less figuring out who will ride and where they will come from. That's sort of the difference we're having with the FTA.
And they probably think you're being overly optimistic in your projections.
What concerns them, that as well as the University of Iowa throws them sort of for a loop, because there's not a ton of university campuses that have done this, and it concerns them that, and as we all know, I mean, the university is it's a beast of its own and has such a huge population that they're concerned about either overinflating numbers or just, you know, figuring out where these students are going to come from and where they're going to get off, where they're going to get on, that sort of thing. Yeah. But it's really, in a nutshell, it's a methodology issue between how that model is created and used, which HDR thought they would be able to do, and then it turns out maybe they won't. They used the same methodology, and it's not totally, I don't want to place that squarely on HDR. They used the same methodology, I think, somewhere in Texas, or no, somewhere in the Southwest, they used the same methodology and it had success. Not sure what's changed.
Yeah.
So if we have to back out of the contract, then we'll have some decisions to make on if we want to try and hire someone else or exactly what to do. But again, Crandall Guerrero and the DOT are both involved as well, so we'll get that all sorted out.
If we backed out and went with someone else, it would seem like we would need to address that
Yeah.
up front.
Yeah, there's
Instead of doing it and then being told it's not going to be accepted.
Right. There's another, what I see as a potential chance to use the City of Iowa City's future transit study that they're embarking on. So Iowa City will have, is essentially working on a transit study right now, or getting someone on contract. Part of what HDR said was we would double the contract amount, basically from 100,000 to 200,000. So that's the DOT and Crandall's involvement as well. They would do a ridership survey on all the CAM Bus, University, and Coralville's buses. That ridership survey is labor intensive, and they said it costs about $100,000. What I don't know is if Iowa City will be doing that as part of their transit study. If they do, there's a chance we might be able to piggyback and actually use that data for this, and I think that might resolve the issue, but I think that will be a while for Iowa City. I mean, I'm guessing that'll be a year maybe before that's completed. So it could just be a timing thing. We'll see. We will see. Enough on passenger rail?
Anything else on that? Okay. Nothing? Thanks, Brad. Any other business
I don't think so.
from anybody? If not, I guess a motion to adjourn in a second and we'll be out of here.
So moved.
All right.
I guess-
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.